It was one of those nights when the world felt like it had already made up its mind about who mattered and who didn't. Rain drizzled down the glistening streets of New York City, painting reflections of neon lights on the wet pavement. A young woman stood under the glowing sign of Le Vieux Chateau, one of Manhattan's most exclusive fine dining restaurants. She was wearing a simple beige coat, her hair tied back neatly, and a pair of worn-out shoes that had seen better days. People passing by barely gave her a glance. Just another face in the crowd, another dreamer standing in front of a place meant for the wealthy. Before we continue, if you believe in kindness, second chances, and never judging someone by their appearance, please take a moment to like, comment, share, and subscribe to Hopeful Stories. Let's spread hope together. When she finally stepped inside, the warmth of the restaurant embraced her like a cruel reminder of everything she had once lost. The chandeliers sparkled above, soft classical music floated through the air, and the faint aroma of truffle and aged wine filled the room. Guests sat around in designer clothes, their laughter echoing like it belonged to a different world. She hesitated near the host's stand, her heart pounding, her hands trembling slightly from both the cold and the fear of being turned away. "Good evening," said the hostess, her smile polite but shallow. "Do you have a reservation?" The woman nodded softly. "Yes, under the name Amelia Bennett." The hostess scanned the screen, and her polite smile faltered for a moment, just long enough to give away her doubt. "Of course," she said, stepping aside. "Right this way." But as Amelia walked past the other tables, whispers followed her. A couple near the window glanced at her shoes. A man in a crisp navy suit leaned toward his date and murmured something that made her giggle. The waiter who led her to her seat seemed confused. "Ma'am," he said carefully, "this section is reserved for members." Amelia looked up at him, her brown eyes calm but deep. "I know," she said. "I'm meeting someone." The waiter hesitated, scanning her coat again before sighing. "Very well." He handed her the menu, though his tone carried disbelief. "Our tasting menu starts at $300 per person. Just so you're aware." She smiled faintly, her voice steady. "That's fine." The waiter walked away, shaking his head. The laughter from a nearby table grew louder. Amelia ignored it, focusing on the sound of the rain tapping against the glass. 5 years ago, she could barely afford a meal. Amelia Bennett had grown up in a small town in Ohio. Her mother worked 2 jobs at a diner, and her father had disappeared before she turned 6. They didn't have much, but her mother always told her, "Never let anyone tell you what you can't afford. Dreams don't have a price tag." Amelia carried those words in her heart, but the world around her rarely made room for dreamers. After high school, she moved to New York City with $200, a secondhand suitcase, and more determination than sense. She worked anywhere she could, washing dishes, cleaning offices at night, selling cheap scarves on street corners. She was invisible to most, spoken to only when someone needed a job done. But beneath her quiet surface was a hunger for something greater. Every night, when she walked past the tall glass buildings in Midtown, she'd look up and whisper to herself, "Someday, I'll be in there." Her break came unexpectedly. A late shift cleaning an office turned into an unlikely conversation with a CEO who forgot his keys. While she mopped the floor, he struck up small talk, impressed by her humility and curiosity. She told him about her dream of starting an online brand that celebrated sustainability and empowerment for women who came from nothing, just like her. He smiled and said, "Send me a proposal tomorrow." She didn't sleep that night. She wrote her heart into that proposal, and that man, Elliot Grayson, the CEO of Grayson Ventures, became her first investor. What followed wasn't easy. She faced rejection, sleepless nights, and moments of collapse. But she learned. She grew. And slowly, Second Leaf, her sustainable fashion line, became something people talked about. Her designs appeared in local magazines, then national ones. Within 3 years, she wasn't just surviving, she was thriving. But despite her success, Amelia never stopped dressing simply or walking like the girl who used to count coins to afford dinner. And that was why tonight, when she walked into that restaurant, Nobody recognized the CEO, who had quietly risen to become one of the youngest millionaires in the fashion industry. The whispers continued as she waited. She overheard one woman at a nearby table whisper, "Poor thing. Probably wandered in by mistake." Another said, "You can't afford this restaurant, sweetheart." Their laughter stung, but Amelia stayed calm. Years of struggle had built armor around her heart. When the waiter returned with the wine list, he hesitated again. "Would you like to see our alternative menu, ma'am?" he asked, implying something cheaper. Amelia looked him in the eye and smiled. "No, thank you. The tasting menu is fine." He nodded awkwardly and walked away. Moments later, she heard one of the servers mutter near the counter, "What's she doing here? This isn't a charity." But just as the tension seemed to thicken, the restaurant doors opened again, and in walked Elliot Grayson himself, impeccably dressed, his familiar smile lighting up the room. The same people who had ignored Amelia moments ago straightened in their seats, whispering excitedly. He scanned the room, spotted her, and walked directly to her table. "Amelia," he said warmly, shaking her hand before pulling out a seat beside her. The entire restaurant seemed to pause. The waiter's eyes widened. "I'm sorry I'm late," Elliot said, placing a folder on the table. "I can't wait to discuss the expansion plans." The whispers that followed weren't of mockery anymore, but of shock. Suddenly, the same people who had looked down on her began to sit straighter, their curiosity replacing judgment. As the waiter approached again, his tone had changed completely. "Ms. Bennett, would you and your guest like the chef's special pairing tonight?" Amelia smiled politely. "Yes, that would be perfect. And please," she added, her voice calm but firm, "put on my card." She reached into her purse and pulled out a platinum credit card. Her name, Amelia Bennett, engraved in silver. The waiter froze, his earlier smugness replaced by embarrassment. The whispers in the room stopped. For a brief second, time felt still. When she handed the card over, she didn't look around to see the stunned faces. She didn't need to. She had nothing to prove. Her journey had already done that for her. As dinner went on, she discussed plans with Elliot about expanding Second Leaf into Europe. Between conversations, she glanced around the restaurant, seeing a reflection of her younger self in the window, a tired girl with big dreams and empty pockets. That girl had walked miles, cried silently in the dark, and refused to give up when the world told her she wasn't enough. After dessert, she excused herself to the restroom. As she walked through the hallway, she passed the same hostess who had looked doubtful earlier. The woman's face flushed with embarrassment. "Ms. Bennett," she said quietly, "I'm so sorry for earlier." Amelia smiled gently. "It's okay," she said. "Just remember, sometimes people can afford more than you think. Not just with money, but with grace." When she returned, the rain outside had stopped. Elliot signed the last of the documents, congratulated her, and left after a friendly goodbye. Amelia sat for a while longer, watching as people began to look at her differently. Some with admiration, some with guilt. She didn't hold it against them. She understood. She had once been invisible too. As she prepared to leave, the waiter returned with her card and whispered, "Thank you for your patience, Ms. Bennett. Everything is taken care of." Amelia smiled again. "No," she said softly. "It's only just beginning." She walked outside, the city lights shimmering across the street. The rain had washed the pavements clean, leaving the world smelling new again. She looked up at the skyline, the same skyline she used to stare at from her small apartment years ago, and whispered a quiet thank you to her mother's memory. Her mother's words came back to her then. "Never let anyone tell you what you can't afford." For the first time in years, Amelia felt peace. Not because of the wealth she now had, but because she had earned it with every ounce of struggle, pain, and resilience that had once threatened to break her. She turned down the street and saw a young girl sitting under a shop canopy, holding a small notebook and a dream in her eyes. Amelia walked over, handed her the business card for Second Leaf, and said, "If you ever need a chance, call me. I know what it's like to start with nothing." The girl's eyes widened. "Thank you," she whispered. Amelia smiled. "Don't thank me yet. Just promise me you'll never stop believing that you can afford to dream big." As Amelia walked away into the New York night, her reflection shimmered across the puddles on the ground. not as the girl who had been laughed at, but as the woman who had redefined what worth truly meant. And maybe, just maybe, somewhere in the city's rhythm, another story of hope was beginning. Sparkles, if this story touched your heart, please like, comment, share, and subscribe to Hopeful Stories. Every click helps us share more stories of courage, kindness, and second chances. Speech balloon before you go, comment below. What would you have done if you were in Amelia's place? Because sometimes the most powerful way to change the world is simply to believe you belong in every room, no matter what anyone says.